Hey kids, do you like wrestling? Well, we like wrestling too. We are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Myself and Chris Novembrino kind of doing a lazy river of wrestling criticism, going through the news and whatever happened in stateside television wrestling. And also, you know what? Sometimes we just like to watch old stuff and talk about that too. Love for you to give us a listen. If you haven't already, we are Shake Them Ropes here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Hello and welcome aboard. Wait, that was the Express. Anyway, welcome to the first episode of the Euroclutch podcast here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. My name's Ian Hamilton and I've been a wrestling fan for way too long. 33 years next month. By God, that's a long time. Anyway, I've been covering wrestling in some form for the best part of 20 years, starting on a website that found out the other week now redirects to Chris Van Vliet's podcast, then a DVD review website. Hey, remember those? Back in the day, used to have a Ringside Live podcast of a late Adam Firestorm. For the past decade, I've been covering European wrestling on backbodydrop.com and more recently the Alpty Fresser podcast. And now I'll be talking about the European scene right here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. Let's get going, shall we? We start this coming weekend, at least as I'm recording this, Progress's Super Strong Style 16. It's their annual tournament at the Electric Ballroom in Camden. Both Sunday and Monday night, bank holiday weekend over here in the UK, will be live on Triller TV+. And hey, it's a remarkably low-key way to celebrate a decade of a tournament. First run back, of course, May 2015, Super Strong Style 16 was Progress's take on a tournament weekend such as Pro Wrestling Guerrilla's Battle of Los Angeles, WXW 16 Karat Gold. Of course, running the Sunday and Monday the bank holiday weekend because the Electric Ballroom these days is busy on a Saturday night. The inaugural tournament had names such as Tommaso Ciampa, Big Daddy Walter, Tommy End, Roderick Strong, whereas the year Will Ospreay won out as his ascendancy in Progress continued. Things grew 2016-2017, still at the ballroom with fly-ins like Chris Hero, Sami Callihan, Matt Cross, Flamita, Matt Riddle, not mentioning him, Jeff Cobb, all those being flown in. And then 2018, they moved to the Alexandra Palace in North London. Much bigger venue than the ballroom, a lot grander. And if you were a fan back then, you would know about that bloody hill. But 2018 was the year that Zack Sabre Jr. reigned supreme among a field that included the likes of Joey Janela, Chris Hero, albeit under the guise of Cassius Ohno, Keith Lee and Helico. And by then it was a 3-day affair. Of course, ballroom, as I said earlier, limited to 2 days. Alexander Palace available for all 3 days. 2019, back at the Palace, we had a Kaiju Big Battle show there. Hey, remember those guys? That was a year won by David Stowe. Let's talk about him. The Flying Foe was a very WWE heavy run. We had the likes of Trevor Lee before he was on TV as Cameron Grimes. Kyle O'Reilly in the middle of his NXT run. DJ Z before he became Joaquin Wild in NXT. Darby Allin, Artemis Spencer, Aerostar, Daga. Hey, if you want to talk about Europeans, Lucky Kid, Ilya Dragunov, all there. And that was pretty much the downswing of the peak, of course. 2019, Progress had their big Wembley show. Gates were starting to struggle a bit, but Super Strong Style 16 definitely big enough to warrant a different venue. And then 2020, well, we know what happened. Alexander Palace was, of course, scheduled. I think even then they were teasing a WWF Attitude Era tribute show, which God knows what that would have looked like. But, of course, COVID happened. We were all stuck indoors instead. Pretty much no wrestling at all. And with Progress instead doing TV tapings in Peckham instead throughout 2021. It was 2022 before Super Strong Style 16 returned. At that point, Super Strong Style 16 had been for the vacated Progress World title. With some shenanigans going on, Jonathan Gresham had won the belt, being retained by foul means, and a month before Super Strong Style 16, stipulation put up, any interference meant he would be stripped of the belt. Lycos Jim, who had been pally with Jonathan Gresham at the time, interfered on his behalf and then turned on him. So, Jonathan Gresham no longer your champion. And heck, Jonathan Gresham didn't even stick around to have a shot for the belt, didn't get a gimme spot in Super Strong Style 16. Hell, he wasn't even back in Progress until the end of the year. Instead, we had, for the field in 2022, we had Aramis, now of course hologram in AEW, Jack Evans, Ricky Shane Page, Johnny Progress, and if you want me to read the long list of names from his cage match, do it yourself. You know the guy with the long list of names, Johnny Blackcraft, Johnny Mundo, Johnny Nitro. Barrier Fly-ins, of course, a clear step down from 2019. This was a Progress that didn't have that clear tie into WWE, nor it seemed that much of an in to get big names from AEW either. And of course, 2022, Progress had gone back to the 3-day event at the Electric Ballroom. That Saturday night spot not really filled. We're all getting back to normality after COVID. And then 2023, Progress got the big score, also they thought. The return of Will Ospreay to Progress after he'd spent years in New Japan, Rev Pro exclusive there. Unfortunately, by 2023, things were kind of back to normal. That Saturday night spot wasn't available anymore. So the opening night of Super Strong Style 16, opening afternoon, Progress seemed to make the call to put themselves as the Saturday afternoon matinee for a WXW touring show on the opening night of Super Strong Style 16. Go figure. But yeah, that first day of Super Strong Style had Will Ospreay beat Tate Mayfair in the main event in front of a crowd of 205. Far from a sellout even at the Tufnell Park Dome, and not really a good sign considering how much upheaval Progress had to go through to bring Will Ospreay back, if you believe the stories. Of course, Will Ospreay didn't make it through to the finals. He lost in the quarterfinals to Nathan Cruz. A tournament was won by Kid Lycos that year, and if you're looking for imports, we were down to Nick Wayne and Shikahiro Irie, plus Big Damo and Maggot if you want to include the Europeans. And hell, Irie was still in Europe from Big WXW tour, so really Nick Wayne was your one main flying for that year. 2024, I guess, licking their wounds after the 205 for Will Ospreay, went back to the original 2-day event of the Ballroom. Luke Jacobs won that year. The field including the likes of Shelton Benjamin. Pretty big get, but maybe not one that really impressed between the bells from the folks who were watching at the time. Igel Blanc, Mike Santana, Mike DeVecchio and Casey Navarro. Still, maybe not the calibre of fly-ins and imports we've been used to, but still pretty decent lineup. Of course, 2025 this weekend, we're back to the 2-day of the Ballroom, and Progress lately have been slacking in terms of announcing names of this. You go to, 16 Karat Gold, they at least start having names about 6-7 months out. Progress, very slow in releasing names, pretty much filled up the slate about a month out. And early today, as I record this, we have the draw for the first round of the tournament. And bearing in mind, the two big imports, or the first two names, in fact, were Jack Morris and Masa Kitamiya from Noah. Those kind of were the peak here, and you'll see as we go through these brackets. So we have Man Like Dries against Ethan Allen is your first match. Tate Mayfair against Masa Kitamiya. Marcus Mathers against Will Cruz. Charlie Sterling against Simon Miller. Jack Morris against Leon Slater. Kid Lycos 2 against Osiah. Michael Oku against Kid Lycos. And Trent 7 against Charles Crowley. That's a bracketed tournament, so basically the winner of match 1 takes on match 2, 3 against 4, and so on and so on. Now, looking at that lineup, it's a hell of a solid home lineup, but as has been the case for the last few years, not really having that big name import. I guess in a couple of years ago, Nick Wayne, the big name, he was on the come up, but before he'd been signed. Shelton Benjamin last year. This year, with all due respect, Noah's not quite the heights that they once were. Jack Morris, he's done runs in Europe. Heck, he was in ICW before he went to Noah, and wasn't really a big star, a big name there, with all due respect. Masa Kitamiya, I would barely say he's a big star, except for a few who are devout Noah fans over here. And remember, Noah had that tour last summer with Progress and didn't exactly do gangbusters. Aside from that, who else your big name? Marcus Mathers, WWE ID talent, who, pick the bunch maybe, but as far as shifting tickets to people who wouldn't be buying tickets to these already, I'm not too sure on that. And I guess this is the problem with 2025 Progress. The homegrown lineup isn't great. They're not really getting the names out there to get the curious eyeballs out there. It's a lot of variations on the same theme. And storyline-wise, all of the home guys have got reasons apart from the, I'm here to win the tournament. Ethan Allen, Man Like Dries, they had, bits and pieces before over Luke Jacobs' recent defence against Leon Slater. Of course, Tate Mayfair's won the Keys to the Kingdom, whatever the Progress's Money in the Bank gimmick was from the Thunder Bastard. Had a shot and came up short and then tailed off to a side feud with Eddie Dennis before Eddie was sent packing into retirement again. Will Cruz just turned, so he's maybe primed for a mini push. Same with Charlie Sterling. He bid farewell to Nick Riley as his tag partner last month. He's in the same boat. Simon Miller lost the Atlas title to Paul Walter House, so might should be disqualified from this, but hey, can't have everything. Leon Slater, after what happened at TNA this past weekend, definitely a name on people's lips. More likely to get caught in this match as well, but again, the same kind of issue Rev Pro had in terms of, do you push him, can you keep him long term at least with reliable dates? We'll get onto that later on. Kid Lycos 2, Zazaya. Kid Lycos 2's always been the underling, so to speak, of Kid Lycos. It's in the name. Michael Oku against Kid Lycos, perhaps the match of the first round, first time matchup surprisingly. I looked through Cage Match and yeah, we've had Oku against Lycos too, but not Oku against Kid Lycos, and maybe that's because their paths have never really crossed, the same divisions at the same time, but that to me, between the bells, match of the round. And then Trent Seven, Charles Crowley rounds it up. Yeah, not my graps, I suppose, would be one way to phrase that, but yeah, that is a lineup. It's a lineup, I guess, but maybe not one which is going to be getting that much in the way of neutral eyeballs, or at least people who wouldn't ordinarily be watching Progress to go, hey, let me plunk down my, 50 quid, 35 quid to get in the building to sit and watch this. Probably get a few people watching on Triller, but beyond that, who knows? Outside of tournaments, we've got 2 title matches announced so far. Cowan challenging Luke Jacobs for Progress Men's World title. That one seemingly on the back of Cowan beating Trent Seven in a, let's be frank, a ridiculous Legends match of pipes of stars of the past, what have you. Of course, Cowan lost to Minoru Suzuki over WrestleMania weekend, so not the best of preparations going in if you want to go down that line of thinking, but it's a match. It's one of it's been whipped up out of nowhere, and obviously a lot of people have their eyeballs on where's Luke Jacobs going. He was one of those litany of names who had that WWE tryout. Luke retained the Progress Tag titles this past weekend at their Live in London show. With rematch, of course, in June at York Hall. So who knows if this is meant to be the beginning of the end, but one worth keeping an eye on, because Cowan coming back and effectively straight into a title picture certainly raises some eyebrows. Elsewhere, we've got the Progress Women's World title with, let's just say, a millefeuille of stipulations. So it's Rio challenging Nina Samuels for Nina's women's title. Of course, Nina beat Rio on a open challenge gimmick in November to rob Rio of having the longest reign as Progress Women's Champion. Of course, Rio, another name from those WWE tryouts, pretty much had a fill with Nina, and she's decided to challenge her under if I lose, I leave rules. So if Rio doesn't win, she's done in Progress. And for the hell of it, Progress has decided to add a unknown at this point special guest referee. If you're watching over WrestleMania weekend, Vert Vixen was pretty much in a whole feud with Rio over the weekend. Had that multi-person match at Defy, and then part of a three-way at the Progress show. I guess the no-brainer money would be she's the special guest ref, but you'd also think if Rio is going, that special guest referee will be going straight into a feud with Nina Samuels for the belt. But, this is 2025 Progress. A lot of what they do, maybe not so much these days, but a lot of what they do doesn't seem to make too much sense. But we'll see what comes of that. But, yeah, as I say, as far as Super Strong Style 16, pretty much every, quote, home name in the field has a storyline reason to want to be entombed. Even if it's just I want to win Super Strong Style 16. But taking a step back, this is just a weird weekend. As I said at the start, it's 10 years since Super Strong Style 16 began. Yet this has gone completely under the radar of Progress. 2022, they booked the Garage in Islington for the 10th anniversary of Progress show. That was the whole thing with Ilya Dragunov coming back from NXT UK, taking on Cara Noir, reigniting that loved, maligned, your miles will vary feud as a one-off, and that lit this fuse between Cara Noir and Spike Trivet in terms of Progress storylines. This year, apart from we're back to the ballroom, and you're always back to the ballroom, it's, like I say, it's gone very unheralded. I guess you could say, well, we missed 2 years because of COVID. It's not for 10th Super Strong Style, but it's an easy gimme for promotions. You've been around 10 years. This is the 10th anniversary of your tournament. The fact that this hasn't been jumped on at all is perplexing at the very least, and an open goal missed at best. But we'll see what comes of Super Strong Style 16, as I say, live on Triller TV Plus this Sunday and Monday. Staying in London, we have another big tournament starting up. This was this past weekend, Rev Pro Live in London 95. It's another tournament, this time say Rev Pro, for a shot at MacLeod's undisputed British heavyweight title. Now, we'll wind a bit back to the start of February, Rev Pro's first Live in London of the year. We had a big laundry list of wrestlers coming out, laying out challenges for Oku's title. Leon Slater, One Called Manders, JJ Gale, Ricky Knight Jr., David Francisco had a shot as well, but we want to memory hold that as best we can. And they all called their shots, and from the 2 big shows this year, One Called Manders came up short in Wolverhampton at Epic Encounters, whilst Leon Slater unsuccessful in Doncaster at High Stakes. Of course, those names on the lineup, Ricky Knight Jr. and JJ Gale, they had a match against each other in Wolverhampton, which Ricky Knight Jr. won. That's not turned into a shot for title, and since we had Oak and Ricky Knight Jr. at Global Wars in Doncaster at the end of 2024, it seems that Rev Pro doesn't want to go straight back to that. So, Rev Pro, this number 1 contenders title tournament, or however you want to best phrase it. 8 men, quarterfinal, semis and a final. We had 2 matches at Live in London 95. We had Ricky Knight Jr. Squash David Francisco in 1 minute 25 with a submission, and Cesare snatched a count-out victory over Jay Joshua. Those, again, both at the 229 this past Sunday. RevProOnDemand.com if you want to watch that back. The rest of the bracket, unknown. We do know the 2 quarterfinals remaining will be on May 11 in Coventry at the HMV Empire. Sheffield 2 weeks later at the network will have the semis and the finals. The winner of that tournament final in Sheffield will get MacLeod at Revolution Rumble at York Hall on June the 22nd. Also announced on that show is CPF going again for the Young Guns for the tag titles in a no disqualification match that was put together in the fallout of CPF's unsuccessful knock at the belts this past Sunday in London. We do have another tournament though at Rev Pro in June. This is a shade over a week earlier, Saturday, June 14th in Stevenage, Gordon Craig Theatre. It's British J Cup time again, and Leo Rush only just used his title shot from winning last year, so I guess the question now is, who's next for Will Caven? Because there's a lot of people, fans, and I guess wrestlers taking up their shots at Caven. Won the belt at the Copper Box anniversary show last August, so I guess the longest reigning champion in Rev Pro today. And right now, the Rev Pro Cruiserweight division feels kind of empty. Robbie X, just based on tenure alone, would have to be the favourite. He'd also be the first 2-time winner of the British J Cup, having won in 2022. But apart from that, you're kind of relying on imports or maybe outside names. Jordan Breaks, he was the champion a couple of reigns ago, lost to Neon, then completely disappeared from Rev Pro, came back at the start of April and was announced as a heavyweight, so that's him taken out of the scene. Cameron Kai, I guess to be a given, but he's had a few shots of the belt and not really been treading water, booking-wise at least. Leon Cage, fresh off his big win over Nino Bryant, you would expect he'd be one of the big favourites, even though 2 wins after a long run have been beaten like a drum. Nino Bryant, again, would be in there, but again, he too has been beaten like a drum. And you would expect, you'd need something to, I guess, kind of kickstart him if he is going to have any kind of serious run. Hell, if you're putting Nino in there, Xander and Leland, his brothers, you'd expect also maybe in contention to fill spots. But then, do you count Chris Ridgway in that mix? What about the rest of CPF? I know CPF currently booked for York Hall, but, and also they do have the trophies gimmick where they can bypass all this, but, do they plug the gaps in? Ethan Allen? Do you bring in Harry Milligan, even though he too's been used as a comedy act and beaten like a drum? Shane Hook, James Ellis, someone else from the New Wave school. And then, do you dig into the CMLL bucket? Do you bring somebody in from New Japan, weeks after Best for Super Junior has finished? It's curious. I mean, we're about 5-6 weeks out, and right now there is nothing for that show announced. we know more for the big York Hall show. Both those shows have had tickets on sale about the same amount of time. And yeah, to me, it's just a bit weird, two big shows one weekend after the other. One, of course, is always going to pale into the background, but it is just a bit odd that we do have, these two big shows. And you'd expect the winner of the British J Cup cashing in their title shot straight away at Revolution Rumble. And again, that will pretty much round out the card, assuming you're not going to have any more big names come in. So we'll see what comes there. But yeah, RevPro, big tournament time coming up. Progress Super Strong Style 16 this weekend. Big fans of people who like filling in brackets, to say the least. Moving on to this quick hit episode, we want to talk about WrestleMania weekend, of course. The dust has long since settled there, but I just want to talk a bit about how it's very much different compared to back in the day as far as European representation. Of course, going back to 2017, 2018, we had a ton of promotions going through. I mean, this year it was just Progress. To be fair, since COVID, it's just been Progress. The days of Rev Pro, WXW having a show there, they're long gone. Fight Club Pro no longer exist. They went through COVID and speaking out. IPW, them of the show with Dynamite Dozen in the crowd in New York City all those years ago, I guess barely exist. I mean, there could be a bit of a thesis there in just what the history of our company is these days. Company sold off, gets rebranded 1 billion times, allegedly still exists today as, I believe, Fight Nation, with a show due to be going on in May, rescheduled for March. But yeah, just that whole thing a bit of a mess. And the original owner of IPW did try a comeback show that drew a similar number of people to that fabled New York City show, with much less in the way of roster names and star power as well. Actually, yeah, looking back at that IPW show, it's absolutely wild that in 2018, MacLeod, I'd say, one of, if not the star of British wrestling today, had two bookings that WrestleMania weekend, both for shows for companies that no longer exist. Bit of a weird miss from Rev Pro in hindsight, but anyway, flash forward to 2025, Progress, they're the ones who flew the flag. We did also have Belgium's Bangers Own Wrestling, strange company with an awful name, but that's my taste. But that was one of those shows that was mostly those in name only. There's a lot of guys who were already in town for WrestleMania weekend filling in the gaps. So you had Joseph Fenech Jr., their champion, of course, on the card, Big F and Joe, Connor Mills, and Rivality from their, I guess, the usual home roster. Rivality being MBM and Ultima Sombra. They were also in the clusterfuck later in the weekend. I guess if you want to count Mao and the Sextol, they're the current Bangers Own tag champions. If you want to count them as regulars, knock yourself out. Meanwhile, Progress's card, I would say, is a bit more closer to, I guess, a stacked ballroom card, even though it didn't have the kind of feel. Again, when you're running WrestleMania weekend, it is very easy just to, chuck your own turnbuckle pad on, put your own graphics up and call it a day. And to be fair, a lot of Progress's travelling shows lately have been that. It's not been the pomp, the grandeur, the power of Progress when he's power, but the ballyhoo you get for ballroom. It's just been insert Progress image.jpg here, put the music up and have at it. But yeah, that Progress card this month in Vegas, Minoru Suzuki, Adam Priest, Paul Walter Hauser being the only debutants. Mind you, of course, those three wouldn't have done the same Electric Ballroom show. So yeah, it may be a bit of an unfair comparison, but certainly a Progress show where you had a lot more stuff that was in canon, in storyline, compared to years gone by. As far as the rest of the European scene, had a quick look through cage matches, and again, I'm recording this April 29th, so if we have anything added after the fact, cage match can be a bit slow to update stuff after WrestleMania weekend, but quick poke through, we had 21 different wrestlers from across Europe appearing over WrestleMania weekend. And, going from the likes of Danny Luna, who had your one match for Deadlock, all the way through to Michael Oku, who did half a dozen bookings. And that was on top of flying back to Doncaster for Rev Pro on the Sunday. Oku may have lost all 6 in the States, but Progress, Defy, Deadlock, the WrestleCon Super Show, New Texas Pro Prestige. It's a hell of a shift. Plus, of course, the Ring of Honor taping in Boston before flying over to Vegas. Hell of a shift for someone who, of course, as it stands, still a lot of questions about the long-term future of Michael Oku on the British scene. Remember last summer the talk he was going to go to AEW? That kind of amounted to nothing. Again, we'll see with Forbidden Door coming up this August. And actually, we may as well segue a brief Forbidden Door thing. Of course, I guess the flagship will talk about this and a few other podcasts as we get new over time. Of course they will. But we had the first pre-sales go up for Forbidden Door and the Dynamite Collision taping in Glasgow. I think pre-sales started on Monday. Bit of a weird one, like they're doing, it's at the O2 Arena, of course, the AEW show for Forbidden Door. And there's a bunch of different pre-sales. You had the Ticketmaster pre-sale with the generic AEW VIP code, which, yeah, that's a tough one to crack, lads. Never guessed that. Fight TV had, I believe, was AEW fan, although not everyone who subscribes to AEW Plus got the passcode in time. I know I didn't. But yeah, no, the early, I haven't seen WrestleTix log anything yet, but the early going seems to be that ticket sales have maybe not been what people expected. And I would suspect, based on the, I guess, the traffic on Monday, a lot of unhappiness about the emergence of our old friend dynamic ticket pricing. I got a ticket on that 10 a.m. Monday slot, right up in regards to the nosebleeds. And apparently the same block in the lunchtime pre-sale went for double the price. So, guys, from what I can tell, the pre-sale, the tickets didn't exactly fly off the shelves. So, if this is what you're doing for dynamic pricing, when there's no slight interest in the pre-sale, heaven help when the full release goes on this Friday. I believe it's an O2 cell phone carrier pre-sale on Wednesday. That'll be pretty much over and done with by the time most of you listen to this. And then, of course, the whole big bum fight starts on the Friday, going for the mass general sale, and we'll see what goes. Certainly, the ticket seat map that went up seemed they only opened half of the O2 Arena for the Forbidden Door show. So the hard campsite completely locked up at this point, and the tickets that went up so far were the old trick of every other row and blocks in 2 or 4, just to screw over anybody going by themselves. Not that I'm bitter or anything like that. And actually just taking a quick look on Ticketmaster as I record this. Again, the AEW Dynamite and Collision Wednesday the 20th of August at the Hydro in Glasgow. If you're looking right now, again, this is just more of a guideline. Cheapest ticket we seem to be able to get is up in the upper tier, about £30 each. The most expensive seats left at the moment, you're looking at around about £400 for front row or for third row facing the ring. So not quite as cheap as it could have been. I believe for the O2, you were looking at around about £1,500 for ringside. With, of course, the take-home chair, more power to you for collect rolls. But yeah, we'll see what goes on with the general sale from the O2 Arena on Friday, and just how I'll go. Definitely in terms of what seats are opened up and where we stand there. Hey, we spoke about a couple of tournaments earlier on. Why not a third one, rounded up for a nice little hat trick? Of German Wrestling Federation. This is a promotion out of Berlin, Germany. A promotion that maybe doesn't get the same interest or eyeballs online as WXW. Of course, 2025 GWF, they run pretty much once a month. Almost exclusive run out of Berlin. They are doing a tour of the likes of Rostock, Hanover and Hamburg in May, in fact. But most of the shows come out of Berlin. They're live on YouTube for free. And yeah, they tend to be pretty okay. I mean, if you look at a booking perspective, it might drive you up the wall in terms of, show to show that maybe isn't that much of a connecting thread. Like, they are very much prone to, hey, he's a new guy, we're going to debut him in a title match and he'll win it out of nowhere. Or teams being thrown together and broken up out of nowhere. I think the only thread from the last year or so that's really struck has been the Blutsbruder. I guess like a biker gang faction, which, although that group has kind of fallen off after the passing of Bad Bones John Klinger last May, they still exist, I guess, in name only, with I guess more as a link to the past, at least in terms of the top-level booking. Of course, when we talk about tournaments, GWF have been running the Light Heavyweight World Cup in recent years. This year, they're ditching the Light Heavyweights. Maybe they solve the issues Rev Pro have. This year, it's just the bog-standard GWF World Cup. We have 8 names. We have the first round of matches. That'll be coming this Sunday, as we record this, May 4th in Berlin. 5:30 p.m. European time, 4:30 British Summer Time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. If you want to watch this, youtube.com/wearegwf. In terms of your matches, you've got Ahura, who was a 16 karat gold finalist earlier this year, against Aitash Bahar. Erkan Sulchani against Tucker. If you remember NXT UK's early days, he was one of the faces from there. Joe Lando and Robbie X. Lando being announced as representing the US against Robbie X, of course, from England. That'd be a very interesting one in terms of how well they match. I mean, those two guys would have been part of the light heavyweight World Cup had that been a thing, so that one definitely pops off the page. As does, for rather different reasons, Axel Tischer against Raj Desi, of course, the artist formerly known as Jinder Mahal. And yeah, that one, yeah, good luck, Axeman, at least from some of the speculation, some of the chatter I've seen. Raj hasn't exactly been pulling up trees on the indies, but strange things have happened, and the GWF crowds always tend to be a lot more forgiving and a lot more, I guess, cheery of familiar faces from WWE of old. And if you're listening to this and can get to Berlin, I believe there's still tickets left for the Festsaal Kreuzberg this coming Sunday. But everyone else, it's up for free on YouTube. It is archived after the fact, so if you want to drop in, that is one that may be worth your time. Of course, will be some non-tournament stuff. GWF aren't exactly known for announcing full cards. And I suspect this Sunday there'll be a lot more than just those tournament matches. So one worth keeping an eye out if you just want something on in the background. A few quick line items to wrap up our first episode. A couple of weeks back, Spinebuster Media wrapped up their Underground series of shows with the crowning of their first Underground champion. So if you haven't been following them, Spinebuster Media, they, I guess, shoot wrestling shows across the UK and I guess around Europe. They have done some stuff in WXW and other European countries. They, I guess, have their own promotion. I guess it's pretty much all empty set stuff. They are starting to do stuff with crowds, but this particular series, the Underground series, was called The Grind, and the formula they ran was kind of Chikara's old 3-point system. You needed to have 3 wins in a row to qualify for a title match, with a difference. You had 3 different medals rather than 3 points, so you had to win a singles match, a match with time limit, and a multi-man match without losing anything in between. So the multi-man match could be a rumble, it could be a gauntlet, it could be a tag match. Of course, singles and time limit stuff, self-explanatory. But yeah, for me, I watched the bulk of this, and I don't want to say it was hit and miss because I got what they were going for, but by the end, it very much did feel like The Grind it was, I guess, advertised as. They didn't really set out much in the way of a structure. Like, it wasn't we're going to be for the next 4 months, which it ended up being in the end, but it wasn't we're going to be running for X weeks, and how many people have got the 3 points at this point will go into the title match. So it just seemed to be completely open-ended, which I guess is one flaw. The other flaw, which some people, this is an absolute deal breaker for, is the fact that this was held in an empty set. It was held at the Kamikaze Dojo in Digbeth in Birmingham. No fans. You had referee, you had camera crew, you had commentary on site, but no fans, no noise. So this was like the very early days of COVID era wrestling, where you had as few bodies as possible on site, which I get, but at the same point it meant that at times this came across as extremely sterile, where you had people wrestling, a lot of names with not that much in the way of experience. So if you're in watching for names, there's a lot of stuff you were kind of slogging through to maybe get the good stuff if you're that way inclined. At the same point, a lot of names without experience. There were points where you maybe got the impression names on there to perhaps make up numbers. Matches which in any other circumstance maybe wouldn't have been even released for public consumption. But it was what it was. The finals came out to be Joseph Connors, Jay Joshua and Millie McKenzie. They won sufficient medals to qualify for the end of season title shot. Joseph Connors won, pinning Jay Joshua to win the belt. It means Joshua and McKenzie go back to square one. Spinebuster have announced a show in about 2 weeks, May 15th in Margate in Kent. They are selling tickets for this. or looking on Google Maps, it is a bit of a trek for people who want to get there. But we are doing tickets for this with in-ring photo opportunities with Medusa Complex, Charlie Evans and Millie McKenzie. They've kind of been the headline act for this particular show. Announced so far for this, we've got Danny Luna against the Duchess, who didn't go undefeated. The opposite, went winless throughout the whole underground / the grind format. We've got Brett Semtex against Jay Joshua, looking to get back on the board. And the big main event, we have Medusa Complex against Rising Tide. That is the team of Shane Hook and Leon Cage, who's been getting a few eyeballs by way of being on the Retro High Stakes show a couple of weeks ago. So I think this won't be streaming live, but it will end up on Spinebuster's YouTube channel, I guess, in the weeks, months ahead. So keep an eye out on that if you are so inclined. Also coming up, we've got Pro Wrestling Eve this coming Friday, May the 2nd, at the Big Penny Social in Walthamstow. It's their 15th anniversary show, and yeah, we've got a couple of matches announced for this. It's Nightshade challenging Nina Samuels for the Eve title. I know in all the promo stuff have made a big deal of Nightshade being at the first Eve show 15 years ago. Nina did have the Eve title. She's defended successfully against Izzy, the Bailey Superfan, over Mania weekend in the Ed and San Antonio Poda Mania show. So again, she's been very active with a lot of belts, but certainly she's had a few very near misses in Eve with title defense. So maybe this is the time, one of those belts goes bye-bye. Elsewhere in the card, we've got Alex Windsor against Martina. Medusa Complex, back again, Charlie Evans and Millie McKenzie taking on Rio and Emerson Jane. And whatever the riot of violence match is, it's an 8-woman tag. Anita Vaughan, Sapphire Reed, Lucy Sky and Harley Hudson taking on Sky Smithson, Rain Leverkusen, Aluna and Lucia Lee. That show will be streaming live on Eve's YouTube paywall, 8 o'clock UK time, 3 o'clock Eastern this coming Friday. So mark 15 years of Eve, you'll need to sign up there on demand through YouTube. Another upcoming show, we've got Ichiban. Guess that's the promotion which ran Michael Satomura's final match in the UK, because Michael retiring early today as I'm recording this. They ran their second show a few weeks back, and their third show's coming up at the Prism in Kingston, southwest London on May 11th. Announced so far, they haven't given any kind of wacky, Ichiban 3, we're back again, or anything like that. It's just Ichiban 3. We've got Danny Luna and Emerson Jane against Medusa Complex. Leon Cage against Trent Seven, a best of 3 falls match. They've been doing something with Leon Cage, having cracks at Trent Seven and coming up short. They're billing this as Leon's final chance. As much as I've not been a fan of Rev Pro beating him like a drum before his big win, I absolutely prefer that to this, but I'm just not a big Trent Seven guy. Rio against Rain Leverkusen, Jordan Briggs against Wild Boar, and Amari against Tate Mayfair's in... Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a step down from the first Ichiban show, but again, if you're starting off with Michael Satomura's last UK show, I think anything's going to be a step down from that regard. I believe those eventually drop in some form on Ichiban's YouTube channel. Maybe a couple worth looking at. Certainly it's on my big backlog. In terms of recent results, we have James Ellis defending the New Wave title against Luke Jacobs at this past Friday's New Wave wrestling season in Cardiff. That'll be popping up on their Defend on Demand subscription in a couple of weeks' time. For those who followed the British scene before the pandemic, New Wave used to be known as Dragon Pro in Wales, and they've been churning out a lot of pretty good names in the last few years. It's been like a virtual production line of names coming out, with your Leon Cages, your Shane Hooks, you've had Alex Vaughan's, Josh Holly, he's around before New Wave, but James Ellis, a name who I've had an eye on for a long while. Just a vertical production line of names coming out through New Wave School from Brendan White and co there. We've got another school, I guess, in the Midlands under Flash Morgan Webster, and I believe we're just about to open a new one in Toronto of all places, which is, one of these things ain't like the others, but yeah, definitely New Wave Wrestling, one to keep an eye on if you want to see the next generation of stars, because by God, they are churning them out. Speaking of Brendan White, he beat Danny Jones to win the Undisputed King of Chaos title at Pro Wrestling Chaos this past Saturday in Bristol. It was a show that also had Nick Riley have his retirement match against Charlie Sterling. That whole show went up yesterday for free on Pro Wrestling Chaos' YouTube channel. Got the link through a tiny URL in the description as well, so one I'll have a look at and get back to you in our next episode. Elsewhere, we had the return of Wrestle Carnival. They've come back from their latest hiatus. The first of their Triple Crown series of shows. Basically, they're doing a series of tournaments with the winner of those getting into a mini tournament of their own. Kind of like Style Battle back in the days. This first one, we dubbed the Foley Tournament, dedicated to the late Carnival staffer Adam Foley, was won by Man Like Dries. Wrestle Carnival back in Coventry on August 17th and then October 12th. And guess that'll do it. Bit of a short show to get us underway here on the Euroclutch podcast. Again, we're not going to be making this like a big old review show where we go in depth on every single show. There's way too much. What I'm hoping to do here is cover the top stories, a few bits you won't necessarily have seen on the usual sites, and maybe cast an eye over some of the small promotions who maybe aren't getting the eyeballs they normally would. But like I say, thanks so much for listening. If you want to follow me, I'm over on Twitter at Ian Wrestling, or hell, just search for Ian Wrestling on all the social media platforms. If you want to follow the podcast, we have got a Twitter account at EuroClutchPod. That'll be built out in the coming weeks. Want to hear me elsewhere? I have the Alpha Professor podcast. That's available over on backbodydrop.com with Mike Kilby. And yeah, we'll be back, I guess, in a few weeks to talk about the tournaments we've just spent a little bit talking about, and a whole lot more. Thanks so much for listening, folks, and we'll see you down the line.
Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.